Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Today we're going to be discussing the 7th round of the UCI Cyclocross World Cup which took place in Hulst. We have reached the halfway point. On one hand I'm thinking, are we already halfway? On the other hand it feels like the World Cup has been going on forever already this season and we're nearing the end. Anyway, today our beloved guest Twan is here to discuss the racing. Welcome on the podcast again, Twan.
Hello.
Thanks again for being here, welcome back. It's been quite a while, good to have you back on. First, before we start and diving into the racing here in Hulst, we have an advertisement because today Mathieu van Empel made his season debut in Hulst, and by now we know he is going to be racing in Benidorm. It's going to be a legendary race on a super challenging course, and his big competitor Wout van Aert is confirmed to be racing there as well. You do not want to miss that action, so use the code CXSocial for 20% discount on your tickets for the Benidorm World Cup. Now into the racing action in Hulst. We had the fastest start for Lars van der Haar, and Mathieu van Empel, who needed to start on the 4th row, was quickly moving through the field. He moved up, made some dive bombs, went around the outside, and within no time he was in the top 10. Already in the first lap he took the lead, but then we saw that Mathieu van Empel had a long time off racing. He started making many mistakes and found himself back in the 7th or 8th position. Thomas Pidcock, who had a cautious start just like yesterday, by then was leading. He started upping the pace and had Laurens Sweeck with him. Mathieu van Empel threw away his gloves and started making serious efforts to join the leading group. Despite some mistakes, he joined the leaders, which meant that Sweeck, Pidcock and Van Empel were leading the race. Van Empel didn't hesitate too long and took measures into his own hands. He was leading, and then Pidcock was the one to make a mistake. Up a very steep double banking, he forgot to shift to a smaller gear before the climb and he couldn't make the top. He needed to unclip and Van Empel opened a 5-second gap there. 5 seconds became 10 seconds and Pidcock from there on was holding the same pace as Van Empel. However, eventually the cord snapped for Pidcock. He couldn't keep it up anymore. Van Empel extended his gap to 17 seconds. Despite a crash, Pidcock couldn't come close anymore. Van Empel went on to claim his victory. First race, first win for Mathieu van Empel. In the final lap, disaster for Thomas Pidcock. His back wheel broke in a downhill and he withdrew from the race. That meant that Laurens Sweeck moved up into second with a, surprising battle unfolding for the 3rd place on the podium. Iserbyt and Van Haar both thought they were racing for 4th, but that became 3rd. Iserbyt, with the advantage of being able to bunny hop the final barriers, just held off Lars van der Haar, but Iserbyt taking 3rd with Van der Haar in 4th. So, Twan, we had the first race here of Mathieu van Empel. He was lightning quick into the field, overtook many riders so quickly. Did you think it would be that easy for him to overtake these riders in his first race of the season?
I thought, looking at the start, it's very hard to actually overtake people, but he was very aggressive in overtaking, just throwing it down the inside of one of his teammates, making sure he got through. He got through with the first few people, and from there on out, I think it's we see Van Empel just getting back into cyclocross, which is very nice to see. I haven't watched much cyclocross this year so far, but it was very, very fun to see Pidcock offering a real challenge. Unfortunately, breaking his wheel and then having to drop out. Very unfortunate because he was the rightful second today.
Yeah, we'll discuss what happened there thoroughly a bit later. First, all attention towards Van Empel, and as you say, it took quite some time for him to really get into a rhythm. Normally when he starts his season, sure, his first race isn't the best, but we don't see him make this many mistakes as we saw today. I think the explanation is super simple for that. Last season he only raced 2 cyclocross races. One was a running race, the second one he withdrew with a crash, or with a back injury after a crash. It's normal that if you've been off competition for so long, haven't done all too much cross training, that you're very rusty. Pidcock last week in Merckx Plus, after just the absence of the road season, was struggling. He was just not smooth through the corners. And here, this is a course that it's just so easy to make a mistake. There's so many off-campers. It was super slippery, even more slippery in the women's race, which we'll talk about later, but still the men's race. It was just, you get offline and then the earth there is super loose and you just slide out and make a mistake. But overall, the sign should be promising because, hey, He's already winning in his first race. The form seems to be there. And once he works to get out this rustiness out of his system, we're going to see the good old Mathieu van der Poel of a couple of seasons ago.
I think it's very interesting to see Van der Poel in this kind of shape. It would be very interesting to see in what kind of shape Wout van Aert is going to be when he rejoins next week. But so far so good. I think Pidcock has still got a few steps to make, but he will have his courses where he can certainly challenge Van der Poel and Van Aert. But I think we see a very strong Van der Poel again, back and instantly winning with a decent gap to the rest of them. But a lot of practice still, just there to get the cross feeling back, to get back to being the best at the technique.
It will come. I mean, he's doing 3 races now, taking a bit of time off to build his form to an even further level, building an endurance base for the road. He's announced that he's going to be targeting the Tour. No insane Giro Tour double after an injury, just classics, then Tour with World Championships, and then we'll see. Who knows, maybe next year he thinks, well, World Championships are early, I'm going to do a full cross season. I don't expect it, to be honest, because he's focusing on the Paris Olympics. He's going to be doing some mountain biking as well. You need to make choices if you want to do everything. You can't do full seasons of everything, and that's normal. His form is promising. He delivered us an entertaining race, and I think we need to give the credit to Zweek and Pidcock for that. As you say, not the best course for Pidcock, but he was pretty close. But I think in the end, even on Pidcock's end, you could see he's not fully adapted to racing here. Remember back last week in Overijse, you had in the final phases of the race, he was about to close the gap to Van Toerenhout, and he made a gearing mistake. He forgot to shift gears on before a corner, which was followed by an uphill. He lost time there. Today, twice that same mistake, and that eventually cost him a lot. I mean, regardless of the mechanical, you can't be making those mistakes if you want a shot against Mathieu van der Poel.
Yeah, I think perfection when you're battling against Van der Poel, it's necessary. I do think he kept the pressure on quite well, kept pretty steady pace. Like a few mistakes here and there, but I think when we see Pidcock, sometimes the consistency is not there. Like, well, it looks like it's very smooth sometimes, but then all of a sudden you see these very basic mistakes where you just see that he has to get the cross feeling back maybe as well, and it's just steps he has to make in the coming weeks to be the best competitor he can be.
But do you think that without that mistake of gearing, because to be honest that is a silly mistake as you say, you think he could have stayed with Van der Poel for a bit longer, or would it be, as we say in Dutch, uitstel van executie, which means you can only prolong the time until your execution, so it would have been dropped regardless?
Yeah, I think at the moment he's just a little bit off, especially on this kind of course, to Van der Poel. But it's like a few things. It's always, of course, best to have the most perfect race technical-wise, because he can do it. I mean, there's a reason he's that good in mountain bike.
Yeah, but mountain biking is like different to what we need here. Like the downhill part, I can agree that's definitely similar, but the cornering here is flat cornering. In mountain bike you have these rock gardens, and that really requires something else than what you see here. But yeah, I agree with you. If he could just have increased his perfection today, just being at 89% perfection instead of 95, could have been with Van der Poel a bit longer. But it's very important to note, the only reason he could be with Van der Poel longer is because Van der Poel himself was making these mistakes. If Van der Poel would have been in his best shape and form, and especially technically, in the first lap he takes the lead there of Van der Haar, he's gone. You're not going to see him again. And that is a sign that this is not the best Van der Poel yet. It's normal, as we just said, that will come. But Pidcock, he was lucky with those mistakes, because he himself, we know he's not the best starter. He's not a terrible starter. But if you want a shot against Van der Poel, you would ideally be leading the pack and opening a gap right away and increasing your buffer over him. And now Pidcock was already overtaken by Van der Poel after a quarter of a lap, and then only taking the lead in the second lap. And the margin you could take on Van der Poel was just significantly lower. And he's lucky that he now can compete, but the signs are promising. And I think we could say the same for Zweek. It's not the perfect course for Zweek. If it was faster, he could have done even better. But again, Zweek just continues to impress, because today was another solid showing by him.
Yeah, of course, I didn't watch much cyclocross this season. I wasn't able to. Seeing Sveik in the shape that he is, it's so much better than he was last year, and I think for him, it must give him a lot of confidence. And I think today, with what would have been a third place, it's something that he can be very happy with, because he's right now he's the best of the rest.
Yeah, and it's not like the best of the rest that he's a minute back. It's like he's the best of the rest. He's able to go with the best riders for a solid amount of time. Halfway through the race, he was still up there. He's still going, he's fighting, he's giving it his all. It's not the perfect course for him. I am really curious to see what he can do in Antwerp next week, because you maybe haven't seen that, but this season already in some of the sand sections, in Niel for instance, he was absolutely flying. Same goes in Merckxplas. He just steamed through as if there was no sand there. It really reminds me of the Laurens Week we saw fighting for the Belgian title with Wout van Aert in Kokzijde. He must be fuming that Kokzijde this year is in January, because he else could have won that race. But next week in Antwerp, I think that he can do even better. And if Van der Poel is still struggling a bit, we know Pidcock is not a good sand rider. Van Aert, big question mark. How is he coming into the season? I look forward to that. Maybe you also look forward to that race?
Yeah, I hope I have time to watch it, because it will be very fun to see them all battle again. Of course, the comeback of Wout van Aert, it's basically a must-watch if you do have the time.
Yeah, it's going to be super good. I look forward to that. If we look a bit further in the result, we have this semi-battle between Iserbyt and Van der Haar. Iserbyt taking that third place in the end. Yesterday in the interview, Iserbyt said, "I learned that I need to keep fighting through races the past couple of weeks." I think we could see the result of that today, because after a terrible lap with multiple mistakes, he was 8th behind Michael van Toerenhout. He fought all the way back to 3rd place, and you can only applaud that improvement and just the different mindset on his side.
Yeah, I think in the past few seasons, what we would have seen is just him dropping further and further down the rankings, where this time he just took a moment to recover in the wheel of Van Toerenhout, and then just started climbing back up the ranking, and overtook Nieuwenhuis, then in the final lap took the battle on with Van der Haar and was able to come out victorious.
Good sign that Iserbyt is improving that side of him, and that's one of the things that annoyed most people. It also annoyed us, the fact that if things didn't go his way, he started whining a bit and, oh yeah, bad start, and then I'm just racing now to finish the race in the back end of the top 10 instead of actually still going for it, because 1 or 2 laps doesn't mean your race is over. And good to see he learned that. Van der Haar, there comes an end to his streak of 15 consecutive podiums. I think today was a decent race by him, but it was not the best course, and especially not the best conditions for Lars van der Haar.
Yeah, and of course, Van der Poel coming back, there's just one less spot to take on that podium. So when Iserbyt actually has the fighting spirit and is able to get back into that race, it becomes very hard to get there, especially with Sveik in this kind of shape. Of course, Pidcock should have been on that podium actually. So it's also it just naturally it gets harder, because the level gets higher as they re-enter the cyclocross world. So it would have ended regardless, I think, somewhere in the this week or next week. But it's very impressive that he even managed to get up that streak. That's a very impressive one. Just a good Van der Haar.
Let's take a look at the entire top 10. Mathieu van der Poel with the win ahead of Laurens Week and Eli Iserbyt. 4th place went to Lars van der Haar ahead of Joris Nieuwenhuis. 6th place for the European champion Michael van Toerenhout. He beat Felipe Orts, Spanish champion, another good result by him in 7th. Jens Adams in 8th, Toon van der Bos in 9th, and the top 10 is rounded out by Kevin Kuhn. Twan, as you said, you've missed quite some races. I've talked you through some of them, and you've seen some of the results. Are there any names in the top 10 that you would like to discuss today?
Yeah, I think Orts, Adams, Van der Bos, Kuhn, they're all just people that are making that step, and it's more that I'm missing names for, like, for example, Van Kessel and Daan Soete. They are nowhere near the top 10 here today, which is very surprising to me. And if I look at the results of Van Kessel, for example, it's just very bad this year, which makes it a lot less surprising. And I think it's very nice to see that Van der Bos is actually like doing good things. Kevin Kuhn, I've seen him. I mean, he grabs quite the attention with his jersey, of course. I've seen him before as well. Like he's been doing very well. Just a steady back end of the top 10 rider, which is very nice to see. Just a different jersey, and of course Orts as always. Just always nice to see that Spanish champions jersey, and he's the best of the rest if you discount the Netherlands and Belgium, of course.
Yeah, it's definitely these riders you mentioned, some new names that become regular top 10 riders. Riders like Soete, Aerts, Looks are struggling a bit to get those results they were able to get last year. About Van Kessel, you probably don't know, but he broke his collarbone early in the season and therefore was ruled out for a time. And, well, you know how the things go. You lose your base, and if you don't have a base layer, he's going to be suffering. His contract with Tormans hasn't been extended. He's able to find a new team. He's going to be racing for Hens Maas starting January 1st. So he was also sick. That's why he skipped yesterday. Definitely not an ideal weekend for him. But yeah, the riders you mentioned, they are definitely more consistent top 10 riders these days. And yeah, that's why we don't really go over them too often. But it's still worth mentioning the fact that if you compare it to last season, what you are doing, they definitely made a step up. And we already consider them regular top 10 riders. I mean, Orts, last year, if you would say Orts is going to be 7th in the World Cup, you would be like, whoa, super good. And now we're like, Orts is 7th. Yeah, nice. Kind of what we expected. So yeah, that's definitely a big shift, and you must probably also have been like surprised when you came back and was returned to watching cycling that you could see Joris Nieuwenhuis first of all doing cross, in voorbal as trek, and then also immediately so high up in the results.
I completely forgot about him. Yes, Nieuwenhuis. I read an email and I was like, what was this bullshit article by Wielerflits about Nieuwenhuis? Like it being a pity that he can't ride World Cup. I was like, this guy is barely doing anything the past few seasons, and like what has even changed? And then I look at his results and I see him race, and it's just steady top 10s, and it's really nice to see Nieuwenhuis actually performing, and that is actually the most surprising thing in this whole top 10. I think the past few seasons we have seen glimpses of this where Nieuwenhuis is just a solid cyclocross rider. But Noah told me during the cross that now he's actually fully focusing back on cyclocross, which is really nice to see. And then we get to see this 5th place.
I mean, we knew the talent was there. I mean, you and I have discussed this thoroughly, that when he was in DSM, that he was ruining a very good cyclocross career to be a lead out. And every day he needs to start the cross from somewhere at the back of the field. He started with like 100 UCI points. And then indeed, yeah, this article about Wielerflits, like, they had a point that it could become an issue, but they just forgot to add to the story that if he gets 2 good results in Overijse and Hulst, which he did, he would be easily on track to claim World Cup selections. He's now going to miss Antwerp. That's the only thing, because once the procedure to register starts, that was this Tuesday, he was 51st on the ranking, or 52nd. Now he's 39th. So he's going to be missing Antwerp. No big deal. You can race Boom the day before, C1. He's 39th. I mean, he's not going to drop out of that top 10 anymore, or top 50 anymore. And then after that, he can race Dublin, he can race Val di Sole, he can race whatever he wants. So he's going to be fine. And today is just another confirmation of the form he has. And we will see how he develops. I hope that he can make a couple of more steps and that we can see him fight for podiums. Because if you remember back to that 2019-2020 season, this guy was a first-year elite and he was already taking podiums in the World Cup between the elites. That was super impressive. If he can return to that form, we're going to be in for a good one with Joris Nieuwenhuis. Let's go and talk about the women's race then. The best start in that race was for Puck Pieterse. They were racing on a course that was a lot wetter than the men's race. It was super slippery. Brandt and Betsema had bad starts, which meant that we were already looking at a battle between Pieterse and Van Empel. Van Empel closed the gap to Pieterse, so that meant that we had 2 leaders. Pieterse stretched the gap, she was jumping the barriers. Van Empel for some reason was walking today, maybe because they were so short after a corner that she wasn't confident to do it on low speed. Van Empel needed to compensate for that, and with Pieterse dragging it out to 10 seconds, Van Empel needed to take big risks. She was absolutely sending it through the downhills, especially this long downhill to the pond. The way she took that left line there, that was something else. She was flying. She didn't care if she crashed. And that is how she closed that gap. But the fact that she didn't care that she was going to crash at some point, because it was inevitable that at some point it would happen, meant that it did happen. Just as she had taken the lead over from Pieterse, she crashed in the downhill. Her steer was broken, her derailleur went into crash mode, and the race was over. Pieterse had a minute, and from there on she could control. She didn't need to go all out anymore, and could even permit to make 2 small mistakes, which resulted in a light crash in the same downhill as Van Empel. So, Puck Pieterse hadn't won a single World Cup before last week, and now 2 in a week she claimed victory here. Van Empel was able to take second place pretty easily, and in the background we saw that Van Anrooij, as we are used to, was using the diesel effort to overtake riders. She moved past Cien del Carmen Alvarado and claimed the 3rd spot on the podium. Well, another win here by Puck Pieterse then, Twan. It was a very good race by her. I thought a pretty mature ride, knowing exactly how much risk to take, where to take them, and how to balance the conditions.
Yeah, I think today it was a nice play park for her, just able to put the pressure on Van Empel all the time, taking control of the race, knowing full well that her technical ability is just slightly above that of Van Empel, which gives her the margin. And as long as she is in front of Van Empel has to compensate all the time, has to take the risk, and this way Pieterse basically forced the mistake, although at that particular point Van Empel was in front of her, which was very interesting to see that she was still taking that much risk. Probably not the smartest decision, but Pieterse just riding it home very maturely.
Yeah, I already said it in the summary. There were just too many risks on the side of Van Empel. I mean, I think she felt that she had to take them, but she was going above her ability. Because even on this big downhill to the pond, which she took absolutely fabulously, like a couple of times she didn't need to compensate at the end, but I think it was in the second lap, you probably remember that as well, when she went down, and then she even went airborne. She needed to correct with her foot because she almost ran into the taping and barriers at the end, and that was already a sign that she was giving it her absolute everything, and she needed to, because Puck Pieterse is able to match the form level of Van Empel now. On the straights, there's not too much difference. In Overijse last week, we saw that even on the uphills, they were pretty evenly matched. Through the corners, Puck Pieterse was quicker. Pieterse could ride some sections, which Van Empel needed to run. The downhill, the barriers. So Van Empel needs to do something, because if you're going to lose 3 or 5 seconds there every lap, you need to find them back, else you're not going to compete for the win. She probably felt that she had to take those risks, and it was a bit of all or nothing. In the end, it turned out to be nothing, so maybe a bit of a mistake, but if she doesn't take them, I don't think she's in contention for the win at all, because then Pieterse stretches that gap of 10 seconds to 15 to 20. Don't know how you think about that, like that it was necessary to go above her capabilities.
I think for today it was clear that if Van Empel wanted to take the victory, she had to go above and beyond and just hope it works out for her. Unfortunately, it doesn't, and I don't think it was ever really there. But I mean, it shows that she is willing to put everything on the line to challenge for the victory and not just instantly settle in for second when it becomes pretty clear that she's not quite there on the day.
I like that mentality of, well, if I can't do it on the power or through the corners, I'm going to just try where I can and go all out in the downhills. It was inevitable that at some point, if you go at 100% or even above 100% in these downhills, that it's going to cost you. But yeah, I mean, if she doesn't do it, she ends second anyway. So it's now either second with a shot at first or second with no shot at first, and she went for second with a shot at first, and that's simply the best what you can do. And sure, Puck Pieterse 2 wins in a row. Van Empel hasn't won in the past 3 World Cup races, but still, it's no serious issue. She peaked towards the European Championships, took some rest, and now is consolidating the lead here. She has a massive lead. She's going to win the World Cup under normal circumstances. It's fine. I mean, there's still time. You need to build in a bit of rest here. Pieterse is taking a different approach because she started her season later, had COVID after the mountain bike worlds, but you can't be at your maximum for the entire season. Like, You know how busy the Christmas period is. You need to like hold back and build up towards that, because else you're just not going to survive. You're going to be completely burnt out towards the Europe or towards the World Championships at the end of January, beginning of February. You just can't do that.
And even on this lesser form, she's still able to hold on to second place quite comfortably. No one's really challenging her. It's really, maybe not surprising, but it's very interesting to see. After last season, I was like, okay, Pieterse, Van Empel, Van Anrooij, there's maybe going to be one or two that are going to make the step, and they're maybe going to dominate the cyclocross season, or at least really put the foot down and start winning regularly, but they have completely taken over. Of course, Brandt is struggling with her hand, and then you have Betsema doing what Betsema is doing, which is not finishing in the top 10, which is very weird. Alvarado making some steps back to her best self, but it's just not quite enough. They have completely taken over the cyclocross scene, which is very nice to see. And it will be there will be some very interesting years. There will be some very interesting battles there.
The gaps today in general were super big. I mean, already after the first lap, there was like only 5-6 riders within a minute. The gaps were huge. And I think that was just due to how technical the course was. Even without the pure power, in terms of power, they're probably closer. But it's just who has the most confidence, who has the most abilities to take the downhills, take the corners, and that's really what made the difference. And as you say, Pieterse, Van Empel and Van Anrooij have taken over. Another podium lookout by the youngsters. They could all still be under 23 riders. So don't forget that. It's super impressive what they are doing. Van Anrooij maybe not exactly what some people had thought after she took the world title in the juniors category in Dubendorf. Was already, remember back in Diegem that year, she was in the leading group with Pieterse. Then her bike broke, she had a puncture, and there was nobody in the pit zone for her. From there on, people might have been thinking, ooh, Van Anrooij is the new deal. But Pieterse was always in the shadow, and she's stepping out now. Van Empel was also in the shadow of Van Anrooij, and now it's disrespectful to say that Van Anrooij is in the shadow of them, because Van Anrooij is doing insane things on the road. She started her season later, her form is still building. Every week we see that there's an improvement on her end. And this is just not the best course for Van Anrooij. Van Anrooij is technically not the best rider. Pieterse, best rider in the pack technically. Van Empel, probably the second one. The way that she has the feeling with the bike is also impressive. And then Van Anrooij, yeah, it's not great, but it's way above average. It's good enough, but today it was, in terms of form, technique, the total package on her end was not good enough for the win or second place. But hey, we move. She's still 20. I mean, maybe she will be better when she's 25. Who knows? Maybe she will transform to a road rider and win the Tour de France Femme. I mean, she won the white jersey this year. So it's still super good what she's doing. She was super good in the Ardennes. Maybe she's going to take a different approach to cross. But that's speculation. Who knows? She seems to enjoy it. So yeah, don't forget that she maybe is now above or below some expectations, just like Vash is, but that it's still a very good level.
Yeah, and I think she certainly has her courses where she's going to be competing with them very well, where the diesel comes more into play. And don't forget, she said in the interview that she crashed yesterday and still wasn't actually sure whether she would start or not today. So it's still a very good achievement, taking that into consideration. And of course, there's still some form just to be built throughout the season. And maybe we'll see beautiful things towards the end. Of course, already a World Cup win this year, which is very impressive.
Exactly. So maybe it's a bit disappointing in the bigger picture if you look back a couple of seasons. But as you say, she already won a World Cup, so it's not going that bad, is it? If we look at the rest of the top 10, behind the youngsters, or as the Belgians now call them, the young three, compared to the big three. On the men's side, I will call them the other big three, because they are the big three, or at least the big three of the future. Behind them we find Seende, Carmen Alvarado in 4th, Brandt in 5th, Ribeyrolles in 6th, Helene Clauzel in 7th, with Inge van der Heijden, Lien Burquier and Aniek van Alphen completing the top 10. I think that from these riders, yeah, I mean, Alvarado, let's talk about her. that was a race filled with mistakes by her. It was just not smooth at all.
Yeah, once she had to get off the bike and had to walk, there were a lot of mistakes. Just really not comfortable running. It seemed like just slipping all over the place. Maybe not made the right choice with the shoes. But yeah, it cost her a lot, and maybe it cost her that podium place, or at least the chance to battle for it with Van Anrooij, which is unfortunate. It's just very costly. But I expect that as the season progresses, Alvarado is just going to keep on fixing these mistakes. It already looks a lot better than it did last year, and slowly getting back to what we saw in the year of Dubendorf.
Yeah, it will of course be difficult for her to dominate in similar fashion due to the arrival of new, younger, stronger, more technical riders. But as you say, the overall trend is good, and today could indeed be a thing that she didn't have the right pins, but I think it was also a bit of clumsiness that we've seen throughout the season, that she's just not flawless enough. There's still too many mistakes in it, and that today cost her a shot at the podium position, but it is what it is. It was a decent race. She was having enough in the tank left to fight off Brandt, who once again put in a very strong final lap. And yeah, I think Brandt, well, I already said this in the preview podcast. I even said it yesterday. Today was going to be a difficult day for her. A lot of steering is required here. She has some metal in her hand, which is obviously hampering her. She doesn't seem to have these subtle movements in her hands. And that's something that was like interesting to see. On the men's side, Van der Poel took off his gloves and he went for it. It's something that's like kind of underestimated your hands. Like your hands do the steering, and you need to have the feel on the bike. Van der Poel takes off his gloves, and from there on things go better. It's not that because he takes the gloves off it's better, but he has warm hands, and it just increases your feel with the bike. It increases your ability to control the bike, which is so important. You need to do super minimal movements with your steer to balance on these off cambers. You need to move your body and your hands in the perfect combination. And if you're having something blocking that, that's going to be difficult. Brandt, not bad. 5th place. It's not great. It's not what she was hoping for probably, but hey, come on. Improvement is there. We saw it week after week that things are improving on her end. And yeah, 5th place. Decent. Once again, a strong final lap overtaking Ribeirol, who also put in a very good race. 6 is again, she's having a good season.
It's one of those achievements by Norbert Ribeirol that you're like, wait, well, how has this happened? But it's just one of those days. It works for her, and then all of a sudden good things can happen. A 6th place when a lot of people are there, the best people are there. It's very impressive, and hopefully something that she can build on for herself in the future.
The new team seems to be working for her, because if we look back at the first year we made the podcast, the 2020-2021 COVID season, the year before, Ribeirol had become the world champion under 23 on a perfect course for her in Dubendorf. Muddy, running, small bankings. It was perfect for her. But she had already shown that it wasn't an incident with some top 5 places after the world championships. The season after, she was struggling. It was not her best season. She was struggling with COVID, had a bad summer. There were some issues. But from there on, now she's left the Star Casino team in the Crahs team. It seems to be working for her because the talent is there. I mean, it's not going to be a rider for the fast courses, but for courses like this, I think there's definitely something in her. Like, the talent is there. It's finally getting out, at least. That's how I see it. Like, I remember we had the discussions, how come that she's struggling 2 seasons in a row, and only towards the end of the season results are starting to come out. Last season was idem dito. Only towards the end of the season she was 2nd at the Belgian Championship. She was 5th in Maldegem, 4th in Brussels, 4th in Oostmalle. But the beginning of the season again was pretty bad. So I don't know if you agree that the talent is there and that it's finally coming out, or that maybe it's just a lucky shot. Don't know how you think about that.
No, I think if Ribeirol has the right kind of form at the right kind of days, because like today, for example, it's quite a tough course, then she really can perform to a higher level than on some other courses. I think she's the kind of rider that you'll see around like 10th to 15th place normally, and then she'll have this kind of day where she can break into the top 10 on a parkour that suits her more.
Yeah, I think that will indeed be something for her, like a solid back-end top 10 rider, and on good courses for her, towards the top 5, maybe sometimes a podium if it's not the best starting field there, but yeah, things are improving on her end. It's nice to see, like, some of these riders that have been struggling. Kay also, there's a bit of improvement on her side. We saw that yesterday in Kortrijk. Annemiek van Alphen also making solid progression, another top 10 in the World Cup, beating, for instance, Bentveld, Bakker. This is important, especially that she beats Bakker. I think Van Alphen and Bakker are locked in for the fight for the final spot at the World Championship squad. That's something we need to keep an eye on, because the selections there are going to become so hard to make. Van Alphen is probably dependent upon the decisions of Van Anrooij, Van Empel and Pieterse. Well, Van Empel made the decision already, but Van Anrooij and Pieterse, will they race with the elites, on 23s? Something to keep in mind. I think final decision we need to make, or discussion. Betsema, what was up? We've seen Betsema struggle the past 3 World Cups. On the other hand, in the Super Prestige and X2O trophies, she shows the form is there. What was up today? Because it's maybe not the best course for Betsema, but for her to end behind Van Alphen and Schreiber, okay, both are having good seasons, but it's below expectations and below Betsema's standard, who is normally super consistent, and now 3 weeks in a row, an outlier downwards.
I think looking at the results this year, they've been steady, not great, but okay enough. And then indeed the last 3 weeks, on the Sunday all of a sudden it's just not working for her. 2 10th places and 12 today. Maybe just fatigue is catching up with her a little bit. That the Saturday it goes okay, but then the Sunday is just a little bit too much. And of course, these days the 3 young riders all focusing on the World Cup and skipping the Saturdays, probably giving them a little bit more of an edge.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. It could be the case that the calendar of Betsema is too packed. We know Betsema is a rider that does so many races. Her calendar is always packed. She always does all the classification, all the exact crosses. She's not a rider that makes choices, and maybe that is hampering her in an era where riders make more choices. As you say, the young riders only choose for the World Cup. They occasionally show up elsewhere. I mean, Van Empel and Van Anrooij rode some exact series, or Van Empel rode some exact crosses in the beginning of the season. Van Anrooij and Van Empel both raced the Koppenberg. Ribeirol did both, but for instance, Clauzel, she didn't race yesterday. So, Van der Heide, idem dito. So, yeah, that could be something. It's interesting to see how it develops. I think there was definitely something up, because this is not normal for Betsema, and she can do better. And I don't know what's up on these Sundays. I mean, Beekse Bergen, bad luck. Overijse just didn't seem to work anymore today. She never really came into the race after a bad start. Let's wait and see. Next week we go to Antwerp. Sand should be a good course for her. We'll see what she can do there. As this race was so early in the morning, there is no round-off of the other races in Europe. However, yesterday evening there was racing in Canada. The Canadian National Championships took place in Langford. There is a new champion in both categories. Tyler Clark won the men's elite race ahead of Quinten Dizera and Gunnar Holmgren. The women's race was won by a junior woman rider, Eva Holmgren, taking the title ahead of Sandra Walter and Holly Henry. Holmgren opted to race with the elites, whilst her sister, Isabel Holmgren, took the title in the women's junior race. So it was definitely a solid day out for the Holmgrens, with 2 wins and a 3rd place. Rochette opted not to defend her national title, as she is already racing in Europe, trying to adapt to the time zones to build her form after a very rough start to the season after being affected with COVID. Things are improving. She ended 2nd yesterday. She did not race today. The first World Cup she will do is probably Val di Sole. There is, however, racing today. There's racing in France, Poland, the Swedish National Championships, and there is another race in Canada, the Bear Crossing GP. We'll give those results somewhere this week, probably in our preview for next week, because Wout van Aert, starting his season in Antwerp, can't let that one go without a preview. Twan, thank you for being here to discuss the racing in Hulst.
Thanks for having me back on.
And as said, preview is coming this week for the World Cup in Antwerp. Don't forget, last minute edition, Laurens Sweeck now the leader in the World Cup. A couple of points ahead of Iserbyt. Going to be an interesting fight next week in Antwerp. See you guys then. Goodbye.